If you've watched any news recently, you might have noticed that China has been the main talk of the town.
China.
In a matter of years, China was able to pull itself from being essentially a fourth world country into a world superpower with ambitions of global domination. And this can be seen nowhere better than in the Balkans. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, China has achieved what Germany has struggled with through 2 world wars in just a matter of a couple of years. But what does that mean? Will we all be out on the streets eating endangered species, trafficking pangolins, and speaking Chinese? 早上好，中国，现在我有冰淇淋，我很喜欢冰淇淋。Over the past 2 years, China has become an increasingly larger and larger investor in the Balkans. Just look at this graph. Serbia initially alone just got a meager investment of 2 million euros in the beginning of the century, while just 8 years later, that number grew to an astonishing 686 million euros. And that's just scratching the surface, as it is estimated that as of right now, there are over 136 Chinese investment projects throughout the entirety of the Balkans worth a whopping $35 billion. Which sounds fantastic, considering this region has been neglected by the EU and everyone else practically more than an alcoholic's child. Everywhere you look, you got the Chinese building something. In Croatia, you got the Pelješac Bridge. In Serbia, the Pupin Bridge. In Montenegro, the Bar Boljare Highway. In Greece, the Port of Piraeus. You got factories on top of mines, on top of more factories, on top of labubus. The Chinese century is here, baby! Friendship over with America. 中国，你是我的 best friend. Or are you? Although this might seem great on paper, in reality, things aren't always the way they seem. And China is doing way more damage than anyone is realizing. For starters, China is not investing in the Balkans out of the goodness of its heart. Rather, due to its ambitions for the Belt and Road Initiative, which is essentially a revival of the Silk Road. How do you increase profits for the guys operating sweatshops back at home? Well, that's easy. You build roads, bridges, ports, and mall gas stations in shithole countries so you can sell your products faster, better, and cheaper. The Balkans, as it so happens, are a gateway to Europe, aka the world's most valuable marketplace. Hence the interest to get these countries' infrastructure on par with the rest of the world, so that more labubus can be sold to white girls without a personality.
I have the one and only 24 karat gold labubu.
I heckin' love consumerism. I love disposable plastic. I adore fast fashion. I want more microplastics in my blood, more greenhouse emissions. And that would be all fine and dandy if it were just that, Live, laugh, love, I always say. But it's not. The first problem we run into here is the way these investments are acquired. You see, for the most part, the Balkans are broke. And to build kilometers on top of kilometers of new, modern highways, you need money, and lots of it. Which frankly, the governments here don't really have, as you can tell by the state of the roads. So, to solve the problem of financing, these countries will essentially get a loan from China to pay China to build them these infrastructure projects, and then pay China with that money plus interest. Montenegro, for example, did exactly that for the construction of the Bar Boljare Highway, where it took out a loan of a whopping $1 billion from the Chinese government, which, unless you're Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk, doesn't seem like that much money. But considering Montenegro's total GDP is $5 billion, makes the loan approximately 1/5 of the country's entire economy. Now, Montenegro has already had a bit of debt, essentially around 63% of the country's GDP. But after acquiring that loan, that debt went way up over 80%, while at the same time, its total debt to China increased to about 50% of the total debt. It doesn't take a genius to understand that Montenegro is a sleepy little country where most of the people are too busy either sleeping or partying with Lukas on his small fleet of yachts to be working to pay off that loan. As such, many have come to speculate that this loan China provided to Montenegro was, well, a debt trap, where they purposely gave them a loan they knew they could never in a million years pay off, just so they could acquire Montenegrin lands and ports as collateral, as stipulated by the contract. Which in dummy terms means Montenegro wouldn't gain shit from building that highway and would essentially lose more money by relinquishing its port. So, yeah. Speaking of financial situations, considering China is slowly taking over the Balkans and eventually we'll all have to conduct our annoying corporate soul-sucking meetings in Chinese, you should start learning the language immediately with FluentU, baby! FluentU is an app and website that makes the language learning experience much more enjoyable and seamless by using real videos like movies and TV shows, music videos, news clips, you know, stuff you'd actually want to watch. You get interactive subtitles, and if you don't know a word, just hover over it and FluentU instantly gives you the definition, an image, pronunciation, example sentences, and even shows you other videos where that word is used. It's incredible for building vocabulary naturally, and get this, they have a Chrome extension that lets you do the same thing on Netflix movies and shows, or YouTube videos that have subtitles. You can even scroll through the app's curated video library suitable for beginner and intermediate level learners. Currently, FluentU supports 10 languages, including Chinese. So, instead of watching Squid Game in that lame commie language 13-year-old white girls obsess about, also known as Korean, you can watch it in a commie language 13-year-old white boys obsess about, whilst observing basic and accurate Chinese speech at the same time. Plus, it's not just about watching content and looking up words. If you want to really hone in on learning languages efficiently, FluentU has this really smart review system with quizzes that builds you up from understanding words to actually forming sentences. It's available on web, iOS, and Android too. Click on the link in the description to get a free 14-day trial and a 40% discount after. If you're serious about mastering a language and want a way to stay motivated using authentic content, I can't recommend FluentU more. It's a true game changer for learning any language. So don't waste any time and check out FluentU today. But debt trapping isn't the only issue the Balkans face when dealing with China. Alongside building infrastructure, the Chinese have also focused on opening up factories and mines throughout the Balkans. Most Chinese investment has been focused on refinement, energetics, and resource extraction industries, mainly in the form of mining. The biggest center of this has been Serbia, where two of the country's biggest companies, both Chinese-owned, Zijin Mining and HBIS Group Serbia, have in 2020 alone exported roughly around $1 billion worth of raw materials back to China, which is essentially just China taking Serbian raw materials and selling it back to itself, with Serbia essentially seeing very little profit for itself from its own resources. The Serbian government, under the presidency of Aleksandar Vucic, also heavily prioritizes giving subsidies to foreign investors, primarily Chinese ones, which is quite problematic considering foreigners who are exporting Serbia's natural resources are getting preferential treatment. Meanwhile, local entrepreneurs get the middle finger and being forced to pay yet another billionth tax to get the billionth license to even start operating their business. And you might be thinking, well, they get subsidies because they provide employment and jobs, which is true for 99% of foreign companies, but with the CCP? Hell no. Most, if not all, Chinese companies in Serbia import their own native workers from China to work on these projects. Hence, if you go to any major mining towns like Bor or Majdanpek, where Zijin operates the mines, you will see a sizable portion of Chinese citizens. Most higher-end positions are given to Chinese guest workers, while menial labor jobs are given to local residents. But even then, a lot of Chinese workers are put into basically just working the mines as well, which essentially just drains the country more of resources, as these workers aren't citizens of Serbia and will eventually leave the country, and with their departure, take the money they earned from working in these mines back home. I mean, shit, this isn't even the case with just mines. Go to any, and I mean any, Chinese store in Serbia or anywhere in the region and take a look at the workers operating them. Chances are, most of the staff is Chinese. Another major issue with Chinese economic investments in the Balkans is the absolute disregard of the environment. I know, I might not really look the part, but I really care about the environment. I always throw away my cigarette butts in the bin and not on the ground. I have a separate bin for recycling, and I throw away my trash accordingly, even though my neighbors couldn't care less about the environment. But you know who cares even less about the environment than my neighbors? China! In Serbia, numerous Chinese-owned factories have popped up over the years, while many of the existing ones are sold to them by the Serbian government, as is the case with the steel mill in the village of Radinac near Belgrade. Ever since its acquisition by the Chinese investors, the village has been covered in a permanent layer of red dust emitted by the factory. Since its acquisition, cancer levels in the village have quadrupled, which has caused many people to leave the village behind. In another village going by the name of Perles, a Chinese plastic recycling factory was opened. Ever since it opened for business, the village has been struggling with the smell of burnt plastic and harmful gases emitted by the factory. In 2021, the refinery was temporarily closed by the government due to environmental concerns, but shortly reopened again. The locals have been constantly asking the local administration to implement adequate air filters into the factory's exhaust, but to no avail. Why the hell would they? This is Serbia after all. Here, we prioritize making the lives of our politicians as cozy and comfortable as possible, meanwhile poisoning the brokies. That's what we call the Sigma grindset. A similar story is also occurring in Bosnia in the city of Tuzla, where the Chinese government acquired ownership over the city's coal power plant. Ever since its existence, Tuzla has been a major industrial hub in the country and a major coal refining station where the power plant provides large amounts of employment to its citizens, as Bosnia exports roughly 1/4 of all the energy it produces. However, since the power plant got taken over by the Chinese, life for those living near it has become much more difficult. The power plant has been dumping wasteful water it used for refining this coal not that far off from the city's center, which has turned the dumping grounds of this water into a complete and utter wasteland. Heavy metals like arsenic, cadmium, chrome, lead, mercury, and nickel can all be found in the soil and air near the factory, alongside in other parts of the city. The water basin where the water is dumped is poorly isolated and seeps out into other waterways, polluting the rest of the country and nearby areas. In all cases that I mentioned beforehand, the locals have tried to appeal to authority figures and the managers of these factories to put adequate measures in protecting the environment, but to no avail. In all cases, environmental activists and locals have tried to get the attention of local authorities and government leadership regarding the damage being done by these factories. But in most cases, the government would just ignore their pleas or state that everything is according to regulation. Journalists have also tried numerous times to get interviews and statements from the Chinese owners of these factories, only to be met with the classic Hassan reaction. Ultimately, this lack of transparency from the Chinese investors and the Balkan governments have not only been fatal to the environment, but to the people as well, as 16 people lost their lives due to it. As you should know by now, Serbia has been going through a slew of mass protests since November last year, when the canopy of the newly renovated train station in Novi Sad collapsed and killed 16 people. This renovation project was a joint effort between the Chinese and Serbian government. When journalists attempted to get documents regarding the renovation during its ongoing process, they were denied both by the Serbian ministry in charge of the project as well as by the Chinese company organizing it. Because, God forbid, trade secrets of renovating a train station get leaked out. We wouldn't want any other competitors building a train station in the meantime. Ultimately, this lack of transparency and negligence on both parts ended up killing 16 people. And so far, no one has been held responsible for the tragedy. Although many in the Balkans initially welcomed Chinese investment and interest in the region due to the long neglect of the EU and the US, slowly, due to environmental neglect, lack of transparency, corruption, and ultimately negligence, opinion has started to shift. Additional discontent has started to rise up as well due to China opening up police stations in Croatia, Serbia, and Hungary. Yes, you heard me right. China has been opening police stations in the Balkans. Officially, these stations have been opened to help poor Chinese tourists in distress, but most of them can be found in heavy Chinese migrant population centers in cities like Novi Sad, Smederevo, and whatever the hell is the Court of Budapest, where a lot of Chinese immigrants live. Which, let's be real, the real reason for opening them up is to have an eye on their precious citizens and for them not to find out the truth about Tiananmen Square in 1989. As a result, many have taken the opening of these police stations as essentially the undermining of these countries' sovereignty and as Chinese neocolonialism. Which is kind of ironic, considering that Serbia denied Austria-Hungary the notion to have its police stationed in Serbia and investigate the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, which then led to the whole World War I ordeal. But the Chinese? Come on in, boys. God Emperor Vucic will provide you a penthouse in Belgrade waterfront, 3 meals a day, and you can even share his wife on the weekends. Glory to China and the CCP! What's in the future for the Balkans? I don't know. But hopefully someone will be able to hold the governments and these investors responsible. Anyways, let me know what you think in the comments down below. As always, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, click that subscribe button, and if you really did, become a member like these wonderful people. My name is Janos, and you've watched Living Around a Clean Europe.